You're listening to Deliberate Living, a podcast that inspires, empowers, and encourages listeners to live life more authentically. My name is Holly Priestley, and I'm a full-time nomad and writer who has been living in my 1997 Ford van since January 1st of 2019. I travel the United States with my dog, learning how to live with more authenticity. I explore different ways people choose to ditch the prescribed life we've all been sold and live on their terms, finding freedom and happiness however they choose. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Deliberate Living Podcast. I am your host, Holly Priestley, and this is my partner in van, Logan Fall. And this week we are tackling some frequently asked questions we've been getting, and then also some specific audience questions about dating on the road, having a relationship on the road, how we do it, like why we still have two vans, how we make it work logistically, what we did in the dating scene, like before we started dating each other, yada, yada, yada. So that's what this episode is all about. And I just want to start off with a little brief history of our couplehood and pre-couplehood for both of us. Logan and I met last January of 2019 in Quartzsite at the Rubber Tramp Rendezvous. At that time, I had been living out of this van, my van, for a year, and he had been living out of his van for about 2.5. The whole first year I was in the van, I was single. I dated around a little bit, but I didn't have any, no boyfriends, no girlfriends, nothing significant like that. Contrary to Logan, who, when he moved into his van, had a girlfriend, moved into his van with a partner, and then after about 8 months, they went their own ways, and now he lives in the van by himself. So that's kind of how we wound up together, I guess. Both solo for quite a bit, and coming together with two vans. We still have two vans. We largely travel together, especially in the off-season. He's a wildland firefighter. He's got a whole episode from about a year ago on the podcast where we talk a little bit more about his lifestyle and his job and all of that. But suffice it to say, we still have two vans. We do travel together quite frequently, especially in the off-season, like right now. And then in the summer season when he goes to work, I still try to stay close, but I don't always, which is part of the reason we still have two vans. Yeah. But that comes along a little later. That's one of the specific questions we're going to answer later in this episode.
Yeah, and this year will be different, so.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a key point in a lot of our answers to these questions is that, everyone's relationship is different. Your needs are different. Your logistics are different. And, we're entering into our second year of dating, and it's going to be different than our first year. So, let's just start answering these questions a little bit. The first question is, do you date on the road? And I feel like...
Yes.
I feel like we've answered that question. Yes, we have. I have a feeling the question might go a little bit deeper as to, how. But, yeah, prior to meeting Logan, I did date on the road a little bit. I'd meet people at events or just out in life. This was pre-COVID, so it was a lot easier to meet people out and about, at breweries or at the gym or, a crag or something like that. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, for me especially, I would meet people doing like things, like-minded things. So rock climbing, breweries, like you mentioned, there's plenty of that. But mainly, I met a lot of people in parking lots and stuff. I've met some of my best friends in parking lots. I've met people I would date later on, around, and just be like, hey, you seem cool. You want to hang out? So a lot of that, birds of a feather, stick together kind of stuff when it comes to the vans, big events, RTR is a good chance to meet cool people. And then you're like, hey, you're actually kind of dope. You want to spend even more time together?
Sometimes they do.
She's still doing it, so don't jinx it for me.
Yep. Yeah. And, one of the other questions we got was specifically about online dating. And I gotta say, it wasn't a good option for me most of the time. I mean, when I was a little bit younger, I did online dating a little bit more, and then I realized that it wasn't serving me the way that I was looking for a relationship. I did find a surprising amount of accidental success using Instagram to meet people to like go on dates with, especially on the road. If you are in a certain part of the world or the country, you can, like van life Arizona, van life Colorado, Montana van life, those kinds of hashtags to let people know where you are, and other people on the road can see those hashtags and might be nearby, want to meet up for a beer or something. So while I don't necessarily use traditional, or I didn't use traditional online dating platforms, I found success with dating in person and then also on Instagram. I know a huge number of people, and I'm sure I know you do too, who use dating apps to get showers and laundry.
I've done that.
Yep. Who like go on a dating app and be like, I travel around. I'm looking for like cool people to hang out with. Also, can I use your shower and your laundry facilities? And like, I've never done that, so I can't speak to how successful it is. But based on what I've seen from other vanners, you can have great success with that. Evidently, you can.
Yeah, it's a weird ask. I think I've only done it like once because it's very strange. I've used couch surfing for that too. But that's an interesting platform because it's very much of a community-based platform for couch surfing. But really, all you need are some of the actual amenities of the actual place and some connection, just some friendship. So I feel like that's probably a better bet in terms of, like a dating app for using people.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of how it feels. So it feels weird, and you have to be very upfront about it. But in terms of dating apps, yeah, I've used them.
Yeah,
I haven't used Instagram though. That's interesting. I've not heard. I mean, I've kind of heard that before, but maybe that's more of a they come to you kind of thing.
You slid into my DMs.
I did do that. But I was looking for people to invite to RTR, so it wasn't like I was trying to be...
He didn't specifically slide in to go on a date.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I was just like, you seem dope, you seem dope, you seem dope, you seem dope. And I asked a bunch of people to come. Yeah. And then this girl showed up, and I was like, fuck. This is going to be dangerous.
But it's kind of the same way, like using Instagram for you to find that, like, I was in Quartzsite and I was coming to RTR. I put the hashtags, like, Rubber Tramp Rendezvous or RTR 2019, and you were searching those hashtags, and you messaged, because we have similar vans and we're similar ages and similar, like, lifestyles, and you were, trying to bring people together for this event. So using Instagram to date, wouldn't necessarily recommend it for like a specific dating purpose, but I have used it that way. So, I think online dating in general is one of those like hit or miss kind of things. For some people, it really, really works, and for some people, it doesn't. And some of that might come down to your expectations and your needs, and then which platforms you're playing on, and figuring out which ones work better for you. Right? Like every platform is for a different purpose, and OkCupid, Tinder, and eHarmony are all owned by the same company, but they are all for people in different phases of their life looking for different phases of relationship. And so if you've been on, for example, Tinder for a long time, and you have gone from being however old you were when Tinder came out, I think I was in my early 20s, to like, aging, you'll start seeing like ads for OkCupid. You'll start seeing ads for eHarmony because they're like, well, Tinder is for a very specific like age group, typically, not always. And then OkCupid is for a specific age group, and then eHarmony is for a specific age group. They're all owned by the same company, and so they all have different purposes, and I think they can be useful if you know what you're getting yourself into and you manage your own expectations for them.
Smart.
But there are a ton of them out there.
They do. I mean, they do work. I've had a couple relationships off of Tinder. So actual relationships.
I never had any relationships off of an online thing.
Not what Tinder's usually known for.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's all about. I don't know. We actually used. When I say we, me and some buddies, we went to Thailand in 2014. And we actually use Tinder to find other English-speaking people around the country.
That's pretty cool.
So I mean, there's lots of uses for these different apps. You just got to be pretty upfront about what you're looking for and recreate responsibly.
I think that is the most important thing. Recreate responsibly.
So,
the next question we both really like. We think it's super interesting. With your state of mind of always moving from place to place to place, do you find that that carries over into your dating life?
That is an interesting question. Well, it's interesting because when you're in a van, there are, statistically speaking, more people that don't live in vans, and you're going to find a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
And when you find someone like that, they are stationary with a life already in a place, and you are not with your life across places. And I think that can be a hurdle unless you really like the place and the life that they've kind of got going on. You can kind of find your own niche in that area, and then you just stick around. But I think for the most part, it's a lot easier to find like-minded people that are moving the same trajectory as you. That's kind of what I got on that front.
I think that it's, what Logan is saying is kind of similar to any other kind of dating. The best way to meet people who like the same things you like is to go do the things you like and be open and deliberate about meeting people doing those things. So before I moved into the van, it was easy for me to meet other people at the climbing gym, because if you were at my gym on a Tuesday at 10 a.m., we have at least 3 or 4 things in common. We have flexible schedules. We're climbing at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. We are clearly investing a lot of time and money, because climbing gyms are expensive, into a hobby and activity that is really important to us. And, those things in and of themselves really allow for, all right, well, we got these pretty cool things in common. Let's see what else we have in common. And so I think in the van community, when you meet people who are stationary, it's kind of all right, well, we've got some pretty big chasms of difference between us. And when you meet people who are also in vans, you're oh, we got something that's really big in common, and that's very cool. So I think there's 2 points I kind of want to make here. And I'll make the stationary one first. I've tried to date people who are stationary after I've moved into the van, and it's been kind of a challenge for what I feel are probably pretty obvious reasons. I'm mobile, and I like to be mobile, and they are stationary, and they like to be stationary, and that's fine. And that's not to say that, mobile and stationary relationships can't work. That's not to say that long-distance relationships can't work. They just don't really work for me personally. And I think, some people really thrive on distance relationships. I don't, so they don't work for me. I also noticed that some of the people that I dated who were stationary after I'd been in the van for a while had a view of what they thought I was, prior to actually getting to know me, right? Because, hashtag van life, hashtag blessed has a stereotype, right? I must be a certain kind of woman, I often found that I was put in this manic pixie dream girl box, and that's not exactly who I am. And it was just kind of interesting, the expectations that my living in a van put on people who were stationary, and how that didn't necessarily mesh with reality. So that is the stationary point I want to make. As far as always moving from place to place and how that carries over into your dating life, I feel again, if you meet up with road people, it's easy to have a situationship, where you happen to be in the same area for a while, and then you caravan for a while, and maybe you try dating, but then if it doesn't work, you're just well, I'm going to go this direction, and you're going to go this direction, and then we're just going to move on. So I think that has actually made that kind of relationship easier, when it's not going to go anywhere, and then you just literally go someplace else and they don't come with you. But as far as our relationship, I don't necessarily think that we've had any kind of what's the phrase I'm looking for? Like I don't feel stuck with you. Like I don't feel like, oh, I can't get away from this guy because we have two separate vans and I totally can. But I don't feel like I'm wandering. I don't have any FOMO of like, oh, well, there's another van down the way and that looks pretty cool. I wonder who's driving that. I feel pretty confident and stable in what we have going on. So like our vans might move from place to place and I get restless and I like to move, but that doesn't necessarily mean that like I want my dating life to constantly be in motion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if your dating life is constantly in motion, that gets exhausting.
It's a lot of work to
it's a lot of work to be
date
single.
People. Yeah,
so
it's a lot of work to be in a relationship too. But
putting up with this one,
Oh man, I am just so much work. The next set of questions all kind of go together, and so I'm going to read them all together, but then we'll probably answer them, pick them apart, and answer them a little bit separately. And this is from a new vanner who is engaged, and so she has been traveling in the van by herself for a little bit, and then I think now he has joined her or something. So she's been really curious about the pros and cons of having two vans. And of course, it would probably be weird to go from one van to two, but sometimes it's so hard to get like that true alone time that you need and to go off and do your own things with just one van. Do you know any couples that have gone from one van to two, and have we ever considered switching to just one van, or have we like tried it out yet? So you have more experience with like two people in one van, and then now we obviously have two. I have no experience with anybody like living with me in this van. The closest that I've had to anybody living with me in this van is him. And like we still have two vans. So you should answer that first, and I will opine.
Fair enough. Well, I moved into my 3-foot low top van with another human, and we hit the road that way. We had no idea what we were getting ourselves into, and we had no preconceived ideas of what we were doing. Just two East Coast kids running to the West, and we actually made it work. We went to Jackson, Wyoming, and we had kind of like a nice like ease into van life where we had she was an interpretive ranger for Grand Teton, and so we got hooked up with the employee like campsite kind of thing. And so we paid a really, really low amount of money for rent each month, and we had like a concrete pad, water hookup, power, a picnic table. So we lived more in and out of the van, which for my experience is the way I kind of prefer to do van life, but it means you have to be comfortable when the weather sucks or kind of manipulate your surroundings to where it works for you. So I kind of call my van like a 2.5 season van. And then I just run to the better season when I tap out on the one that's not working for me. And so we actually made it work with one van. But there's challenges, especially with it being like a low top, for example. One person was basically on the floor, getting up, doing things, getting dressed, cooking, whatever, and the other person had to be like on the bed or in the front seat. It was like that's the way it is, unless we had the door open. But it's close quarters. I've been hit in the face by elbows before, and it's just what happens.
I mean, that happens in high roof vans too.
It does, but less so, and it's more aggressive in a low top. Get out of here. But you can do it. You can do it with two people in one van. It's just close quarters, and you really have to have your systems like down, which we did. We had really good systems. I think the relationship just didn't work out as a whole. But on terms of like cohabitating, we were killing it because we had moved in together. Like every inch of that space was like ours, and it wasn't like, well, this is mine, this is your. It was just like, this is what we got. Make it work. But we also had the ability to have an escape pod. This was before I bought the dirt bike for my van. But we hauled her Honda Fit out west with us on a U-Haul trailer. And so we had two vehicles, which I think is key for if you're only going to have one van, you should have another vehicle, whether it be like another car, a motorcycle, maybe a mountain bike, like just something so that you can like get away and you don't feel like you're trapped in the same space. Because there are times where you are going to be annoyed with the other person, or you're going to want some alone time from the other person. You're like, I'm really tired of seeing your face. I need to go elsewhere for a little bit. Like, you just get antsy. You just got to go. And so being able to have a second mode of transportation, I think, is super vital. And it's also nice because when you have a home base and then an escape pod, you can leave the home base set up. So we would leave the van on the concrete pad a lot of times and just use the one van, or would do a shuttle. Whoever was coming back first would grab the van and put it back at the campsite. So, you just kind of got to figure out what works well for you. But I think if there's going to be two humans, there need to be two engines.
I think that's a pretty good rule of thumb.
Because you're going to get sick of each other and you're going to need some alone time. And I think it's vital to have, either hobbies like dirt biking, mountain biking that give you that physical space, or just to have, a pickup truck or, a car for the grocery getter or something, just something to kind of get your own drive time, your own space. I know personally, when it comes to having two vans, I really like to drive. And not only that, I really like to drive my van. And so, we have had a heated discussion or two. The question was asked, have we ever considered switching to one van or tried it out? Well, we tried it once, and it worked, but it was stressful as the man who left his van for said adventure.
It was like one night.
It was one night, but it was a stressful night. So that's all I got to say. But it's nice being able to drive your own van, have your own systems, and have somebody else that also has their own van and their own systems, and those two systems come together, and then you've got a ton of good stuff going on.
Yeah, I think as far as having two vans versus one van, when we first started dating, I thought, like, oh, well, obviously we're going to go down to one van because that is way more efficient. You don't have to pay for two giant tanks of gas. You get to share driving duties. It just makes so much sense to only have one van. And then the longer that we date and we keep having two vans, the more I'm like, oh, this is great. We should not have one van. And part of that comes down to the logistics of like our lifestyle and his job. I will not have one van as long as he does fire, because if he does fire all summer long and we live in one van, I'm kind of trapped to where he goes. And we've both used that word trapped now a few times, and how it's not a good feeling.
Yeah.
So as long as like this is our lifestyle, we will definitely have two vans so that I can get away from whatever the hell fire season shows up. That's something that I really need. I know a number of people who do have two people for one van, and they make it work. And I think that's great. I don't think I know anyone who has gone from one van to two.
I know a lot of people that have gone from one van to two vehicles.
Yeah, two vehicles maybe, but just like one house.
I think it would be very doable to have, like, as weird as this may sound, having the home and then the weekend warrior, which sounds ironic when it's just two cars. But
like mine is like the house that we live in, and his is like the storage unit, which is great. But also, like, when we need to go do separate things, like we need to be in two different parts of the country for work or whatever, I mean, he can still live out of his. And I can live out of mine.
Yeah. And I do store a lot of stuff around, on top of, everywhere on that van. But I think it's important to have two rigs, of any sort. It doesn't have to be engines. It doesn't have to be a second van, just two engines.
Yeah. I think that, like, it doesn't matter how in love you are, or how wonderful your relationship is, or how infrequently you argue, or the fact that you, like, are working together on the company that you're building together. Like, it doesn't matter how together you are and how wonderful things are. You're still going to need your alone time. It's really important to people. Like, I'm an introvert and he's an extrovert, so yeah, I need a little bit more alone time than he does, but he still needs alone time as well. Like, if you're trapped with somebody, especially in the winter or in the springtime, or like whenever there's like really bad weather and you can't be outside and you're like trapped in your like 60 square feet of living space together, you will be at each other's throats before too long, and that's fine. So I think that like living in a van especially gives couples the opportunity to learn how to communicate in a variety of different ways to figure out which way works best for you. I don't recommend raising the volume of your arguments.
You will get into squabbles.
You will.
And they will be over super petty things. I think probably one of the most intense arguments I've ever had was over who was going to empty the pee jug that night, and it wasn't between us two. It was me and the ex-girlfriend that I moved into the van with, and our biggest fight was when we were in Portland one night, and we were arguing over who was gonna empty the damn little pee jug, and we were upset about it.
And it seems like such a small thing to be upset about.
And then we got over it, and then we thought it was really funny from that point on. Yeah,
we bicker a lot, especially about like food. And we don't necessarily notice that we're doing it, but once I realize that we're just like bickering back and forth, then I'll start laughing and like making fun of us because it's kind of funny. It's ridiculous.
It is.
But it will happen, and you know, sometimes it won't be funny, and you'll definitely need to just go away and like take your bike, your dirt bike, your mountain bike, take your feet and go for a walk or a hike or a run, or you know, if you have a tow car, like you're going to need your own space. So I'm not saying that, you know, couples who live in one van are like going to combust, because that's not true. Doomed. Like, I've seen so many people, their relationship gets so much stronger when they like move onto the road. Like I said, it gives you the opportunity to figure out your communication. I do think that having your alone time is important, and figuring out what that looks like for you is pretty critical.
Yeah. Ironically, it's easy to run from your problems with a partner if you've got all the normal everyday stressors of, you know, a 9-to-5 job and like your own vehicle to do what you want after work or whatever, and you don't come home until later, and then, you know, you minimize your time at home.
Yeah.
Don't really get that option when you've got the van.
Yeah,
you're
everything
kind of
is magnified.
flung into your problems.
Yeah.
Head first, and you've got to just deal with it.
Yeah.
Get it done.
Yeah, I think the best thing, the best analogy I can make is just like kind of how COVID made or broke a lot of couples last year, because they were starting to have to spend so much more time together. You know, you didn't have the same distractions together alone. But yeah, so many couples like got stronger because of COVID, because now they got to spend all this time together and like figure out all of those things. And some couples that maybe didn't have the healthiest relationships kind of combusted. And I think that vanning does that to you as well. If your relationship is strong and is going to continue to be strong or even get stronger, you know, vanning is great. And if your relationship is already kind of on the rocks, then it's just going to bring a magnifying glass to all of your issues.
Stand by for the Netflix original hit series, Stranded at Home with Your Boo. So another user reached out and just replied with one word and said hygiene. So we're going to take and run with that in kind of the way that we see fit. I think that a lot of people get weird about using the facilities whilst in the van. And that is something that some people are more comfortable with, but you will get super comfortable with it as time goes on. Mm-hmm. And then before too long, you're both sitting there peeing into your individual jugs, and
always a good idea to have two jugs.
You just look over the other person, you just start laughing, because when I first was in here, in Holly's van, she would always make me like turn around when she used the restroom, or she'd be like, "Go outside," you know, or something like that. And then, you know, the other day we're just tandem, you know, and I think that's personally kind of funny.
It's true romance.
True romance at its finest. But you just become more in tune with what each person needs. And sometimes you both just gotta go at the same time. There is no waiting.
This kind of, like, as far as pee jugs and, like, general hygiene goes, when I first got into the van and I would try and date guys who were stationary, if they came on a camping trip with me or something, you gotta pee eventually, and sometimes you can't go outside because it's raining or whatever, and then you have to pee inside. And it doesn't really bother me. I've been camping my whole life, so I don't have a problem, like, popping a squat in front of people. But people who maybe don't do that and who aren't familiar with the van lifestyle do get weird about you peeing right there, right next to them. So strange. And so then when we started dating, like, one of my favorite things about dating Logan at the beginning was that he had already been doing this for a while. So it wasn't new to him that I had to pee in a jug. Like, it wasn't weird to him like it was weird for other people.
Nature calls for everyone.
Yeah, and I think that's something, like, as far as hygiene goes, you get comfortable being, like living in a van in general, you get comfortable, like, being dirty. You get comfortable, like, showering less, and, like, I don't have running water, neither does Logan. Like, we do a lot of wet wipes to, like, stay clean and things like that. But having someone who you can be comfortable being gross with is kind of nice, as, like, gross as that sounds.
Sounds very gross. I will add a caveat to that there are obviously times where we need to freshen up.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing when it comes to, hygiene as related to maybe, like, showering or dirty clothes or things like that is to just be, you're just more mindful. Like, yeah, you're, a dirt bag on the road, but you can't get away with quite as much when you have to start thinking about somebody else being, like, thinking you might be smelling a little bit, or how many times have you worn that shirt, or something like that. And it's, it's important to, be mindful about it before it becomes a problem. Not that it really ever kind of has been for us, but, like, if you think you're smelling a little bit, just a little wet wipe goes a long way,
Yeah.
And just, use when needed. And, like, wet wipes are cheap,
Keep them on hand. I buy them in bulk.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 4-packs.
Yeah.
It's nice. And, you can do it very quickly. Like, I think you can wet wipe shower in about 30 seconds to a minute. If doing it well.
Yeah.
And so, get the highlights, get yourself feeling a little clean, change out your clothes. I know it's important to find, either people with laundry or, a free laundry or a cheap laundry situation. But I think it's important to also not, like, be stinking and making somebody else uncomfortable. So
yeah,
when you start thinking you might be smelling, it might be time to toss that in the hamper and do a little wet wipe and start with something fresh. So
when in doubt, ask. I ask you all the time, like, does this shirt smell?
Mm-hmm.
Usually it does.
But yeah, hygiene. Well, big open-ended question.
Yeah. Hopefully we covered whatever the actual question was.
Yeah, I feel like we did. Other hygiene-related issues would be brushing our teeth. This one is a particular favorite. Because someone in our midst is uncomfortable with saliva.
I really, really, really hate saliva. And so, like, brushing teeth is a very separate activity. I don't really like being around when he has to brush his teeth.
Which I've never seen before. I have never seen this. I've never had this problem.
I want to brush my teeth in private. Like, I just don't... I don't like the teeth brushing thing. But that is, like, that is a very specific thing to our relationship, to my neuroticisms.
Yes.
Ideally, you won't have to deal with that because it's pretty inconvenient.
Yeah. But, if you got a sink, just brush them and send it down the sink, wash it down so it goes out. Or, if you're in my situation where I don't have a sink, you just go brush your teeth and find a nice little patch of grass and let it go.
Yeah. tandem peeing in our pee jugs doesn't bother me, but brushing our teeth near each other bothers me. So you got to figure out what it is for you that drives you crazy.
Exactly. And then once you find out something that drives your partner crazy, you do it every once in a while just to keep them in check. So sometimes when you're brushing your teeth and then you turn to your babe and you're like, how about you get that one here for me? It's great.
This has been another episode of Deliberate Living. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have additional questions about dating or relationships on the road, or our relationship specifically, how we make it work with our vans, yada, yada, yada.
Or more quirks from Holly C. Priestley.
Feel free to put those questions in the comments or send them to us, and we will follow up in a future episode. If you got value out of this episode, go ahead and give it a thumbs up or a 5 stars, whatever it is on the platform that you're consuming this on. That helps us get seen, that shows the algorithms that people like us, and we can actually get this information out there to help more individuals. And if you want to help offset some of the costs that go into making the podcast, I have a Venmo and a PayPal set up as well. They are linked in the comments. And in the next few weeks, I'm going to start having some really exciting giveaways for the 1-year podcast anniversary of Deliberate Living. So keep an eye out for those as well. This one is going to be giving away a calendar, which is super exciting. Yes. But we have a lot of other really great prizes and discounts and things like that from previous guests. So again, thank you for tuning in to Deliberate Living, and we will see you next week. Bye! We've reached the end of this episode of Deliberate Living. You can find the show notes and everything we referenced over on my website, and be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, on YouTube, or sign up for email updates every time something new is published. I'll see you next time on Deliberate Living, and until then, keep your life on the DL too.